We need more podcasts, more people that look like us doing things like that is so easily attainable because we don't see enough of that. You know, like it's one of those for every 50 wild podcasts that we know about.
What up? It's Dramos, and this is the recap, of course, as I usually do every week, breaking down some of the biggest headlines from this last week. Now, I know we were off for a few weeks. We were taking a little break, a little mid-season vacation, but we are back at it. And man, ready to get into all that we missed out on these last few weeks. Now, help me break down some of these headlines. My guest today is a fellow DJ. He is also the host of the Wave Files podcast. My guy, Reg West, will be hopping on in just a little bit to help me break down some of these stories. But before that, man, let's get into some of the BS that's been going on since we've been out. Now, we've been off for the last few weeks or so, and obviously a lot has happened. I mean, we've had multiple horrific mass shootings, and quite honestly, politicians just seem to be losing their damn mind. And by any normal observation, one would think that the world, or at least this country, is falling apart, right? But sadly, it's just another normal week here in the US of A, right? Now, this is a country that not even halfway through the year has already had over 200 mass shootings. Now, any of these tragedies would be a good enough reason to finally say enough is enough. But what we saw in Uvalde, Texas, where 19 elementary school kids were senselessly murdered, that right there should be the final straw. Like, if there was ever going to be a final straw, one would think that would be it. You know what? Finally, something that wakes us all up to the need for gun reform in this country. But of course not, right? We live in a country where politicians, you know, they run ads like this one.
In 2022, I'm going to blow away the Democrat socialist agenda.
And where just days after these horrific murders, people like Ted Cruz and Donald Trump proudly take the stage as keynote speakers for an NRA conference in literally the same state where, again, 19 elementary school kids were just murdered days before. How? That's all I can ask. How? How do you do that? They don't care. Sadly, proving time and time again where their priorities are. And it's the people that line their pockets, the NRA. And what's also sad is, aside from these little speaking conferences that they happily participated in, we also live in a country where, amidst the public outcry that we've been seeing for stricter gun laws, elected officials in the same state where, again, 19 elementary school kids were brutally murdered in that same state, elected officials decide that instead of addressing what is an obvious issue with guns, specifically military-grade weaponry, and the fact that it's far too easy for people to access, instead of addressing that, no, our elected officials are deciding to instead focus their efforts on the real enemy of children in this country. Drag queens. Yes, you heard that right. Drag queens. I wish I was kidding. You see, you have Brian Slatton, who is a Texas state representative, and amidst all that's going on, the horrible tragedy that we saw in the state that he is elected to represent, he decided to ignore all of that and instead propose a bill that would ban children from attending drag shows. Now, we're in a country where majority of people on both sides of the aisle believe that there should be stricter gun laws. But instead, this is what elected officials are doing. This is what they are focusing and wasting their time on, right? And I'd be willing to bet that if anything is going to scar little Timmy for life, it's probably going to be the normalization of active shooter drills in his school and the consistent news headlines of a new school shooting. It's probably not going to be the local drag brunch that he somehow ended up at, right? And listen, I totally get it if you think in afternoon watching drag queens absolutely slay in 7-inch stilettos to the soundtrack of Beyonce's greatest hits, if you think that that might be just a bit too much for your preteen to handle, like I really do. I understand if it might be too much for them. But should we really be worrying about who is attending drag shows, as the death of 19 elementary school children could have easily been prevented if we just enacted laws that made military-grade weapons equally as difficult to get in this country as cigarettes, right? We literally live in a country that happily sells you multiple semi-automatic rifles when you turn 18, but tells you, sorry, kid, you got to wait till you're 21 to light up a cigarette. Make it make sense, please. Make it make sense. Now, with that said, let's lighten things up a little bit, as best as we can, man, in these current times, with my guest helping me break it all down this week. He is a fellow DJ, host of the Wave Files podcast. Reg West, how you feeling?
I'm feeling amazing, my guy. How are you?
Man, I'm good. I'm hyped. It's not often that I get a fellow DJ on the show. So first and foremost, I'm excited to be surrounded by a like-minded individual here.
We can have shop talk. You know what
I mean? Exactly. Well, and listen, I know you got the podcast. I mean, you are out there. You're busy. You're DJing. You're doing them celeb events, them sports events. I know you're a busy man. I want to get into all that you do, but if it's cool with you, I first want to touch on a couple different current events that have been going on and get your take on them.
Absolutely. Let's get to it.
All right, man. So I started the beginning of the show diving into this story, but I want to get your perspective. I mean, we have Brian Slayton, who is this representative from Texas, right? And we all know what happened in Texas just a couple weeks ago, the terrible massacre that we saw on elementary school children, right?
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk about gun reform in this country, about things we could do to make sure that horrible events like this no longer continue to happen, because they're just far too regular in this country at this point.
Sure.
And while all of that is being discussed, you have this representative from the state of Texas instead introducing a bill that would ban children from attending drag shows. And that is where this man's mind is at right now. Again, an elected official put in office by the people to do the will of the people. I mean, it's all obviously incredibly heavy right now, but man, you see stuff like this. I mean, what's your take on this? I
think it's regular politics every day. It's look, we all know hustlers. We all know people who come from a business of, I'm gonna show you this, so you don't look at this.
Right.
You know what I mean? This is all this is, man. Like he's pandering to the people that he wants to vote for him. It's regular business. So all you got to do is the same stuff we always have to do. Just keep putting what we need to go right back in their face. Like, look, this is the real problem. Right. Why are we being distracted? Stop getting distracted. So that's really my take on it, man. People get distracted too easily by the small talk and the foolishness. Just got to stay focused. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, I mean, that's the scary thing, is because it's like we live in a time now where these people aren't even trying to hide their evil, right? You know what I'm saying? That's what makes, because at least at one point, maybe you could shame them into pretending like they cared, right? And now it's like, yo, because if you look at the numbers, even majority of people even gun owners, gun supporters want stricter regulations, right? It's something like 80%, 90%, depending on what the actual policy is. But these politicians are literally saying, no, we're not going to change anything. We don't see a problem. Actually, we should just start only allowing one door in, one door out at these schools. That'll solve the issue, right? And it's like, man, how do you keep some sort of hope, some semblance of like good faith when they're literally ignoring the will of the people,
Things don't change. I think Dramos. I think it just evolves into different types of like. So everybody. So to your point, like before, people used to like be in the shadows and not talk about their views on certain topics. Mm-hmm. But since of social media, like you can find people in other areas that agree with you. Right. So why hide now? Like I know my man in Iowa that agrees with me. Right. I don't need to be ashamed of my ignorance. Because that's really what it is. You're blinded by your foolishness and not understanding someone else's situation. So you push your agenda, not being aware of how other people might see the same thing. Like the view of the stadium could be different from the other side. It's the same thing, So that's the problem that we're dealing with, and we keep continuing to have to fight because politicians are being politicians and getting paid to hide the truth,
Right. So. Right. No, I think you actually bring up a great point that I think isn't spoken about enough, right? That social media has allowed these people who at one point existed in the shadows out of fear of maybe being the only person, right? Yep. They now are gaining confidence because they're seeing it left and right, on Facebook, on whatever social media platform. I mean, hell, on the news, on Fox News, right? They're seeing like-minded individuals like themselves. And now they're like, yo, why do I have to hide anymore? My view is right. It's shared by a lot of people. And that's the scary thing. It is a lot of people.
But what's crazy, Dramos, is that it's not just that thing, right? It could be anything. Like, yo, I like girls with left toes. Oh, you like girls with left toes? I like girls with left toes too. So there's a group for that. So it could be any iteration of that. Just some of them are more just more dangerous than others, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and yeah, dangerous is definitely the key word here when you talk about these groups that are organizing. Now, on some positivity here, I mean, as much as you can find in sort of the current climate that there is, I liked seeing somebody like Matthew McConaughey taking a stand, and he's one of these guys, raised in Texas, right? He talks about loving the Second Amendment right to own guns, gun owner, proud of it, believes we all should have guns, right? And while I may disagree on certain points with that, I think it's bold to see somebody like that take a stand against maybe what some of his followers would have liked him to say, and really just point out the atrocity of the situation and the hypocrisy of those in office who are protecting basically the ability for more of these massacres to happen, And I know it becomes tricky in the world of celebrity, in the world of anybody with a platform, right? Yep. Not everybody is educated, right? Not everybody is well-versed on these topics. And at the same time, even when you just think about what puts food on the table, right? Does your audience who is paying your salary essentially always want to hear your political point of view, right? They might have liked you for your song or your acting or whatever it is that you do, right? I mean, I have my own take on this. I believe that a platform comes with a great deal of responsibility. But I would love to kind of hear your take on this. I mean, because it's always open dialogue. I mean, when it comes to this idea of celebrities, people with a platform, like, do you put that sort of expectation on them to speak out in times like this?
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like if you're educated on the topic and the conversation, you can speak up because your celebrity gives you that platform of a large audience to pay attention to what you're saying. Right. As long as you're educated on the topic, I see no problem with Matthew McConaughey going ahead, talking about the situation and speaking about certain topics. I mean, like what 3 news cycles ago was Ye. Like everybody was like getting on Ye because Ye, why are you talking about this? You have no idea what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Right. So that just goes to your point of should you speak or shouldn't you speak? Like LeBron talks about it all the time. Like, why shouldn't I be talking about my blackness in public? Yeah. I'm educated on it. Like I should be able to speak about the topic. So that's just my view on it, man. If you have a solid education on the topic and you're well versed in having conversations with different individuals, you should definitely speak up and use your platform to make the world a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I definitely, appreciate that take. I think because it's also a double-sided coin. If you are not educated, it can be extremely dangerous to have that kind of platform and to be spewing things out there, right?
Yes.
But I think you're right when you bring up somebody like LeBron. He's a black man in America. He has an opinion about being a black man in America, right? He has that lived experience. At the end of the day, these are human beings just like us, right? They are taxpayers just like us. They are voters just like us, right? Just like any one of us has an opinion. We go to we go to vote when it's time to do that, right? Just like anybody else. But I agree. I think, where the line could be, I mean, if somebody is not well versed in this kind of thing, you can just say like, yo, this is wrong. I don't know what the right answer is, but something needs to be addressed here, right?
Like, let me help. My celebrity can assist.
Right.
So please let me help however I can help. That should be the conversation, right?
Right. Absolutely. I love when people who have platforms say, listen, I'm not the most educated on this, but I understand its importance of conversation. Let me bring on an expert and have them use my platform to educate people on what's actually happening, right? And
exactly.
And I love seeing that. I think a lot of people, we saw the LeBron thing, shut up and dribble type of thing. And it's like, listen, that he doesn't have to, just because of his profession doesn't mean he doesn't get to have an opinion, or doesn't mean that he doesn't get to, use the blessing that is a platform, like you said, to try to make this world a better place. And I think as long as you do it intelligently, bringing on people who are experts in it, or you yourself, like Matthew McConaughey seems pretty well versed as like a gun owner himself, knowing regulations and things like that. Right. I personally agree. I don't think that there's an issue with this, and I wouldn't knock somebody for deciding that they want to use their gift of a platform for the greater good.
Plus, he's from there, so like I feel like he thinks, and I'm like again, I hate speaking for people, but I feel like he might feel like, yo, I'm from here. I'm obligated to stand up. Like I might know this person's aunt or this person's cousin.
Right.
Like it just makes sense for me to say something.
Yeah. No. And I completely agree with that. I think it's a great take. Now switching gears just a little bit. I mean, we're staying in the world of music here, and you have people like Young Thug and Gunna who are being brought up on these RICO charges, right? Racketeering, and that they are like the leaders of this gang, right? And all these different things. And you have their lyrics being used against them in court right now, right?
Yeah,
and this is bringing up a really interesting debate. I have to give a shout out to Ari Melber on MSNBC, because I was watching his show, and he made a great comparison where he said, we all just saw this highly publicized case with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, right?
Yes.
And at no point in time was anybody bringing up Johnny Depp's acting roles and using his role as Captain Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean as some sort of case study in him being a violent human being, right?
Yeah.
But for this art that is music, somehow, some way, they're now trying to use it against these men. And he brought up the great point of, if these were white artists, would this be even a question? Because again, credit to him, he brought up songs like I Shot the Sheriff, which is a song that was originally sung by a white artist. You have Johnny Cash, he has a song about killing somebody. You have Eric Clapton talking about cocaine, and he was actually busted for drugs, yet that song was never used against him, right? But now it's because it's these black artists, and you have maybe a generational gap of the understanding of music. Somehow, some way, we're now twisting and turning art and allowing that to be used as evidence. I mean, listen, you're a music guy. You've been in these rooms. You've been in these studios. You've seen how a lot of these artists work. I mean, what's your take when you start seeing stories like this and these songs being used against them in court?
I might get a little flack for this, but it gets dicey because I feel like, again, social media, we're in this age of showing what we do, where we're from, where we're at, who we hang out with, who we stand next to.
Right.
So it for people who are uneducated on how they move, it might look like something's going on. So they're gonna try to use any little thing to tie them together to negative situations that might be happening in the streets. Do I think it's right? Nah.
Right.
But do I understand why they're trying to do it? Yeah. Because they're trying to get their just like politicians.
Yeah.
Lawyers, DAs, they're all trying to get their name up.
Of course.
It's the same thing, right? If you take it back to to the Murder Inc. era when they were having their issues.
Sure.
They were trying to use their lyrics to a degree too. You know what I mean? Like, yo, the name of your company is Murder Inc.
Right.
Like they're really trying to bring the whole thing down. So
right.
So do I think it's right? Nah. But do I understand why they're trying to do it? Yeah. Should it be illegal for them to do it? Absolutely.
Right.
So there needs to be some type of push to make that a situation of, look, this is art. Like these people are singing songs. You can't chastise them for singing songs. So yes, I definitely feel like we gotta get this, legally done so that this can't happen again, because we don't know if this is really going on, and and they don't either. So they're just drawing at straws. We got to stop them from being able to draw at straws just to get these kids locked up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and I completely agree. I think it's kind of, man, when you think about this, it's like, it shows you that being a person of color in America, it don't matter how much money you got, somehow, some way, people can still find a way to take you down if they feel like you are standing in the way of them getting something that they want, right? And in this case, you talk about lawyers being the same as politicians. Like, they work their way up the food chain of being, the head attorney for that state, then the country, right? Like all these different, the attorney general, right? All these different titles that they can do. Rudy Giuliani is a great example of that, right?
Sure.
So they're looking for the big fish that they can get on the hook for these types of cases. And unfortunately, people like Young Thug and Gunna are going to be, what's that?
They stand out.
Right. They're easy targets. They're young, they're black, they're rich, and they're singing about, guns and a violent lifestyle that they grew up around, right? So it's very easy to try and paint them into that corner. And for the uneducated person, they're going to see that as autobiographical and just throw them in jail based upon that, right?
Right.
Now, let's play devil's advocate over here, though, for a second, because you also do hear some talk about at what point does hip hop have to take accountability for the message that it portrays out there, right?
Sure.
And I think you had somebody like Kendrick on this last album kind of even talking about it a little bit as well, right? And talking about kind of some of the messaging that goes out there, and maybe having a questioning of how much responsibility do I bear if I'm portraying something. And obviously Kendrick is not in that world, but still talks about the life that he saw when he grew up, being from one of the most famous hoods in America, Compton, right?
Absolutely.
And so I'm curious for you. I mean, when you hear that kind of pushback, that sort of conversation, and I'm just talking about people in the community. I don't expect some white 60-year-old judge to be out there trying to tell us that, right? But
sure.
But as a fan of the music, as somebody who works in the music industry, do you think there's any validity to that kind of conversation of hip hop sort of bringing some of the trouble onto itself because of what it might glorify?
I feel like it stems deeper than that. It becomes a community issue, right? Because what you see is what you talk about.
Sure.
So, and it goes deeper than that.
Right.
Why are these record companies pushing this message? Because it sells, right?
Right.
Sex sells. Violence sells.
Right.
Like that's so. If you're being incentivized for violent behavior, why would you stop?
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's my real take on it. Like all these record labels are just, feeding the problem, you know? So if you tell me that these record companies will stop spending these big budgets on these projects, the direction will shift. That's just my take. You know what I mean? Like that's the way the money flows in this country.
Right.
Sex sells, violence sells. Let's push it. But and just to wrap it up, I feel like there's this YouTube video that I comes up every now and again of this dude doing a TED talk.
Yeah.
Talking. I'm sure you've seen it. So if I start talking about it, you can be like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Where this white gentleman's on stage talking about a black man can talk about murdering another black man, but he can't talk about murdering a Jewish man. He can't talk about murdering a cop because that's no good.
Yeah.
But if he's talking about murdering his man in the hood, sure, no problem.
Right.
Put it out. Let's go. So that's just what makes money for them.
That's a great point. I love the way you put that, because if you think about it, you have a kid from the hood, right? Let's just use a generalization of many people that end up in hip hop, right? The areas, the situations that they come from,
sure.
And you have a record label offering them essentially $1 million, let's say, right, for a recording contract. Of course, they're gonna do whatever they have to do to get that money to pull themselves out of that situation, right? And I think that you're bringing up a great point, because when people have that conversation, they're talking about the symptom rather than the disease itself, right?
Yep.
Think about what this country has done to people of color to put them in situations where they feel like they have no real opportunity aside from these very small things, right? It's like go to League of Rap, right? That real like stereotypical thing that most kids are kind of feeling when they grow up in a certain area, right? So if you're looking for somebody to blame, I would agree, and I feel like that I'm having like a stream of consciousness moment as we talk about it. But yeah, I think you look at what is the situation that was created that's so dire that makes these kids feel like their only way out is to sort of, I don't want to say sell out your community, but kind of continue on the generational curse, right? That comes along with being in violent areas, or comes along with things like that, right? I mean, the system has created that, right? And the record labels are profiting off of a system that has created that.
Right. So that's just my point. Like situations might be happening in the hood, but if you're able to monetize, painting this picture and continuing the cycle, then of course you're gonna do that. You know what I mean? So I think we as a community need to figure out, like, we gotta do something slightly different. And the money will hopefully shift. Like you said, like a Kendrick. Because Kendrick breaks through. Cole breaks through. But that's far few in between the thousands of other acts that, are gonna be on these festivals this summer. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, I mean, and it's also, I think, it is the result of trauma as well, right? I think a lot of people don't because they've gone through so much stuff, right? A lot of people are dealing with PTSD from the events that they've grown up seeing.
That's very true. We don't talk about that enough. We talk about these national headline events like school shootings and this and that, but homie from the hood got PTSD because he saw his friend get blown away on the block. It's just real. Or if he don't have no food at the house, like weekly, it's real.
Right. And your mind begins to normalize that as a means for you to get through another day, right? So it begins to normalize the idea that you might not make it to a certain age, right? It begins to normalize the idea that your only way out is through this or possibly some sort of crime that gets you quick money, right? The PTSD, the trauma that's created by the system is what continues to perpetuate this kind of thing. And most people don't even realize that that's what they're dealing with, right? And that's why they continue on with this same kind of cycle that is, unbecoming of them, right? And it happens in every community. I mean, when you talk about people of color, there are so many things in the Latin community where there's like generational curses that we just keep going over and over and over again, But I mean, to your point, when you talk about somebody like a Kendrick or a Cole, those are the guys that are beginning to break through, or have broken through, right? And maybe begun to change some mindsets. And then even outside of music, I love, seeing people like Earn Your Leisure, right? A really dope podcast.
Very dope podcast.
Like those guys are showing you there is another way, right? And I think those are the things that become very important, because when you see somebody who looks like you, speaks like you, is of the culture, understands your language, understands the history of it, and then is showing you a different way, that's when the mindset begins to change.
That's a fact. So, but we need more of that because these large corporations don't want you to level up. They need you to stay where you are, so they can stay where they are. Right. Like the seat, they don't want the seating to change. If the seating starts to change, things get a little grimy for them. So So that's a very good point. We need more podcasts, more people that look like us doing things like that is so easily attainable, because we don't see enough of that. It's one of those for every 50 wild podcasts that we know about. You know what I mean?
Right. No, that's definitely a fact. I mean, listen, while we're on the topic of podcasts, man, let's talk about your podcast, the Wave Files podcast, which, by the way, I love the name. I think anybody who is downloads music and produces music, DJs,
you understand the topic. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I mean, so anybody that is unfamiliar with the podcast, I mean, let's talk about what exactly you do on there. What are the kind of conversations? I know you always have a bunch of different guests on there. So, I mean, what is typically happening on the Waves File podcast?
So to your point, it definitely has to do with music. But on top of that, the Wave is talking about the wave that we get on when we're riding the wave of success or decline.
Yeah.
You know, so Wave Files podcast started during the pandemic, just like most people. So I'm gonna do a podcast. It happened during the pandemic,
right?
And me and my friends were just on the chats, like, yo, we should just talk like what we talking about on the camera, just so that people can understand like what we do for a living. So I reached out to some of my homies who do different things in the industry or might be an artist, and that's how it started. Just having a public conversation that we might normally have in private, just catching up. Right. So like some of my artist friends like Jay Sean or some of my industry friends who toured the world with Usher, or some of my other homies that might own a chain of restaurants, or just so on and so forth, just showing people, like you said, that you can do it too. Like it's attainable to not be your quote unquote artist or your quote unquote, athlete. There's other avenues into the business too. Like I have a friend of mine who was the lead marketing of Google, and she's under 40. She was on Forbes under 40 list. Like, and it was like, things like that can be attainable. So that's what the Wave File podcast is really about. Just showing you that you can do it too. And just having a good time having a conversation with some of my peers and my friends.
Yeah, and I think you had somebody on there who was Beyonce's engineer, I think, for a minute, right? So I mean, like I love that kind of thing because you're pulling back the curtain, right? And and you're showing people the various levels that there are and opportunities that there are in these industries, right? Everybody immediately goes to the person in front of the camera, being the artist, being the host, whatever the case may be. But there are a slew of other things that you could do if you have a love for music, that you can put yourself in a position to find a career and find success. So I thought that was really, really dope as well, because I feel like it opens people's eyes a bit.
Absolutely. So people, if you want to go check out that interview, it's my guy DJ Swivel. DJ Swivel started out as a DJ, became an engineer, and he also produces now for BTS. So his house is crazy. So anyway, like it's to your point. Like we're going behind the curtain and just seeing what there is to do in this business besides pick up a microphone.
Right. I love that, man. Kudos to you on that. I mean, anything else, man, you wanna push people to? I mean, shout out your socials. I've enjoyed this conversation. I mean, anything else aside from the podcast that you're working on, you think people should be checking out?
I mean, not necessarily. Like most, like you said, you can just catch me on the socials. It's at DJ Reg West.
My dude, but listen, it's been a pleasure getting to talk with you, my bro. I really appreciate the conversation, you hopping on the show, and I'm sure we'll connect in person, hopefully sooner than later.
Listen, I love this show. I love what you're doing here, my man. Shout to what you're doing with this and your level up too, because I saw where you was at before and you moving, brother.
So, I appreciate you.
So keep it going, man. We here watching.
Thank you, my bro. I appreciate that. Man, big shout out to my guest this week, Reg West. Make sure you check out the Wave Files podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. And man, before we get out of here, let's end on some much needed positivity in the form of a positive quote. Now, this week's quote comes to us from George Eliot, and it is my message to the politicians out there who have yet to do the right thing, who are pushing against what the American people want, pushing against what would actually keep us safe in this country. This is my message, my hope for you. When I read this quote, it is with you in mind. And the quote is, "It's never too late to be what you might have been." It's never too late, man, to turn over a new page, to do the right thing. We've all made mistakes in this life. We have all been a part of things that we look back on and are horrified that we had our hat, in that game, so to speak, right? But we've grown from it. We've learned. And to me, that is the part of the human experience, right? It is learning and doing better once you have learned, right? And once you see what is actually right and you have the opportunity to do what is right, it is up to you to evolve past the basic thinking, the things that you were taught, the things that you did for survival before, and to do what is right. If you have the opportunity to do what is right. And that's what my hope is for anybody that is sitting here pushing against what would be an obvious solution. How many more bodies, how many more tragedies do we have to see? How many more parents have to bury their children? How many more people have to bury loved ones who were literally just going about their everyday life and were senselessly killed through events that could have been prevented had we have just made things a little bit harder for the perpetrators to commit these heinous acts. Had this killer in Uvalde, Texas, not been legally able to purchase these rifles at the age of 18, those 19 children would be home right now with their families. Instead, their parents are burying them far before their time. It's never too late to be what you might have been. Do the right thing. That's my message to these politicians out there. Do the right thing. Our country needs it. Plain and simple. And with that said, thank y'all so much for tuning into this week's episode. It's good to be back. It was so strange having all of this going on and not having a place to speak on it, to connect with you. And I'm really grateful to have a platform like this one. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, breaking it all down. Until then, please stay safe, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.